only give you a representation of the current state of the system. Same thing with find one. Save or update and save. You can see those have voids on them. I'm asking you to change the state of the system. Once I save it, then I can go back and query for it. A lot of people like to combine these two. They like to say save it, or they like to save something. This is kind of a bad example because I don't have any bad examples of command query in this particular code. I mean, we could write one up. But just think about saving information or creating an instance of an object, asking your repository to create a new customer, and at the same time returning that customer. That might not be applicable. Again, go back to the CQS architecture. They're two different databases. Your service layer is making the decision on where information is supposed to come from. We get into services, implementation. Oh, you know what? There might be a violation in here that we can find. Am I answering your question?
Actually, I'm interested in more details, like where command contains business logic, not just delegates to some service. Reach complex business logic.
They typically do not. Typically, that business logic exists within the aggregate. Commands are being performed on an aggregate. Yes. So the business logic typically resides within the aggregate. And what you're really doing is you're either querying for information from the aggregate or you're performing commands to change the state of an aggregate. So that business logic resides in the aggregate itself. Does that make sense? Now, within your aggregate, now you're getting into situations where, yes, you have business logic in there that's on commands. Because your aggregate root is responsible for the entire aggregate. So anytime you're adding a line item to an order, you get the order aggregate root, and then you're asking to add line items. Even though a line item may be another object, it's a value object within that aggregate, and you only deal with it through the aggregate root. So yes, within the aggregate itself, those commands always have business logic because they're being performed on the aggregate. In service layers, repository layers, stuff like that, no. You're typically just asking the aggregate to perform some sort of action. You're asking the repository to do something with the aggregate. But the aggregate itself contains the business logic. So yes, its commands contain business logic. And its queries contain business logic to maybe massage some data a little bit. Or handles the immutability of collections, stuff like that.
So Ryan can create some ugly command or query and can do anything you want to the system, because Ryan just implement some interface and can shot your system with some, say, attack, this logic attack.
So say that again?
Ryan can implement command for interface
Uh-huh.
with some attack, say, some against
So talk to me after we're at which time we have? A couple of minutes?
Can I ask one question?
Yes, sir.
Because regarding the business logic, yeah, we're thinking more about it recently because when we want to develop a huge system, we also could concern a solution that we have a business logic server. And then do we have such solutions that we have a message that contains that business logic itself?
No. Messages do not contain business logic. Messages are DTOs. Messages describe the behavior that exists within the black box of the service now. And you're just sending in that information and asking the service to perform actions on it. Yeah, messages are just DTOs. That's all they are. Oh, we still got, where's my watch wrong? Oh, we still got like 10 minutes. Do we? Do we have 10 minutes? Okay. Any other questions?
Is there anything like reliable transaction between systems that run like multiple service boundaries, like the picture of trust transaction, or should we just build a system to publish subscribe?
Publish and subscribe is still transaction. I mean, you can ensure that once you publish a message,
So you can trust that those things can be
sure,
backbones.
the transaction is handled by the bus and by MSMQ. So your queue server has to be transactional.
Don't use any other means.
Well, your queue, I mean, you're going to have a queue somewhere, right? Because you're not publishing to an endpoint within a service boundary. You're publishing to a queue. Because it's distributed messaging, it's a pull system. The subscriber is only going to be able to pull what you're publishing when it's convenient for the subscriber. He may be within a transaction already. So you always have to publish to some sort of queue, because then it's being picked up. I mean, think about processing 500 messages a second. It's very difficult. Those messages are going to stack up. You can send out messages a lot faster than you can process a message. Because all you have to do is just send the message, right? But when you process a message, you're invoking a handler for that message. And then it's got to process the entire message, do its thing, and then you'll pick up another. And again, it also depends on the amount of threads that you have available. But pub/sub is typically always transactional in nature. So if something happens, the process crashes. Well, that message is still going to be there on MSMQ, and it can be picked up and recovered.
Service bus tied to MSMQ.
It's not tied to MSMQ. That's just one implementation. That's just active queue. What's the one from IBM? I think it's just called MQ or something, I think. I'm sorry? Oh, is it? Yeah, MSMQ is just one implementation. You can use any queue server that's out there and available. You guys get to browse my iTunes collection there. We go back up into a. Oh, you know what? Here's a perfect example of we're doing request response within post. This authentication service receives the authentication request message. It's going to convert that DTO, that message, into an object that it understands, which are credentials. And it's going to do an authenticate through a service. Well, this is the full duplex scenario that we looked at. I want to audit the fact that somebody successfully logged into the system. But I don't want my user to have to wait for me to audit that information before I let them log in and start shopping and start making me money. So the audit, you can see right here, here's the bus.reply. Now we call audit because I say I want to audit this message, but the audit is doing a fire and forget. It's doing a bus.publish. I want them to get into the system, authenticate, get into the system, start shopping. That audit may not happen for 5 minutes. Depends on the availability of the audit server. It might be down. It might be busy. It might be something happened to it, I don't know. But if your audit service is down because the process crashed, or somebody rebooted the computer, or